Hello everyone, Kenty Tiger here with Bengali Engineering and Play. We are back in Space Engineers and we're continuing on in our Enginerds World Adventures, which is kind of a recreation, not really, but sort of. So the original one of these was built in the Enginerds world. So made some pretty major changes off screen here. So I added in the fifth assembler on this row just because there was room. So I replumbed all of this. I moved the connector that was out here over to here. I added another connector on this side. We already had all of these guys under here. Originally I had this kind of amalgamation thing of sorters and everything to deal with stone, including the teleport in. My idea, and accepting that there's BRS system and the nanite control factory here, the production barge here is pretty much vanilla. So those are the only two items on here that are non-vanilla. Everything else is vanilla. And I've kind of done that on purpose. Two reasons. Number one, the Enginerds world actually was semi-vanilla. There were a couple more or less utility kind of mods, and then the nanite control factory. So that came across by virtue of I built that in that world. So that came across with the temp base at the time. So we, let me see, put connectors on the back here, mostly just because more flexibility. Under here is where I have plumbed in this processing thing for stone. So we have this guy here is the cargo teleporter. So it brings everything in and dumps it into the container that's behind that connector, which is the elsewhere receiver. We have a Kenty Mega Refinery, Mega Mini Refinery here, which was similar to what was already bolted up yonder. This one is half the size and does quite a bit better. This is a trace element extractor, and one of the things I still need to do and have not done is go back into my own personal mod, which is where that gravel to ore extraction is defined, and add another zero, maybe even another couple zeros in there. So the concept is trace. So for every kilogram of stone that you bring in, which is really to say ore, or gravel rather, gravel. So this thing, the concept behind this is you pulverize that into just particulates, and then through that process you manage to pull out trace elements. Now the key word here being trace elements, and we're talking about in a kilogram of gravel having like a tenth of a gram of platinum. I mean something just ridiculously small. So trace elements. That's the concept here. So my idea there is that obviously we're pulling trace elements out of gravel, so we're already outside of the realm of vanilla, but we got to do something with the stone. It kind of turns stone into something somewhat useful. Now when I'm talking somewhat useful, how useful is that? Well, in terms of platinum use, very. No way around that, because platinum you need so little platinum to do the different things. The 0.02 of an ingot of platinum, and I don't know what the units really translate into, or if they translate into anything at all. So units, whatever that happens to be. So there are different items that take 0.02 units of platinum. So you put enough gravel through a stone extractor, a mineral extractor, trace element extractor, and you'll eventually have your 0.02. In fact, very quickly you have a 0.02. And that's mostly a function of the sheer volume of stone we end up with. And we can either dump that into space, which is something that typically happens. In fact, many people who build larger scale miners build very specifically with stone ejection in mind. So we pull out that stone, dump it into some sort of conveyor system where we can get rid of it, just to get it out of the system. And I've been playing a little bit in one of the Keen servers, and have done that kind of thing, and I still need to test it to see if it works. But the concept there is that's what I am intending on doing, is having some sort of mechanism that can pull stone out and eject it out of the system. Now, the problem on small miners is the cargo containers are fairly large. So trying to deal with a cargo container, especially that you take a medium-sized container, has one large port on each end and two small ports on the side. So not four small ports, but two small ports. And the sorter for the small category is a large port. So you're kind of stuck with, okay, do I want to put a sorter here, and then what can I do with that sorter to actually eject the stone out? And the only thing I can really do is use a connector as an ejector. But the problem is, the second I put a sorter on the other side of a connector, I can no longer put anything into the ship, because it's designed for moving stuff out. So the sorter is inherently one way. So babble, I kind of got off on the tangent, but I want to create a stone ejection system for use on pure vanilla. Not only because of the challenge of doing a pure vanilla miner, but really figuring out how to make everything work, get the stone ejection system functional, and more importantly, how the hell to make it work. I'm really curious how I can get a stone ejection system to work purely vanilla, small grid. So as I was saying, so we have a processor here. The idea behind this is of course a mega mini refinery. So it will process anything, but the idea here is to process the stone into gravel, and then the gravel trace extractor can work with it, and then it goes back into the refinery, changes those various ore types into ingots. This guy blocks stone and gravel. So stone and gravel cannot go into the station proper. So the idea behind that is we leave all the stone and gravel right here. This guy pulls in everything but ore. And I was thinking about, so the concept here is pass through. So ammo will come through freely, components, hand tools, and ingots. Nothing else will come through. So none of the ores will come through. Now, is that a problem? Yes and no. It's a problem from the perspective of it kind of defeats the entire purpose of having, there's 8 refineries up there. There are, I think, 7, maybe 8 arc furnaces. So it kind of defeats the purpose of having all those, because if only ingots can come from this assembly into the station proper, then what's the purpose of the vast majority of the station? There is argument that, well, being able to move ore in is valid, especially from the perspective that 99% of the ore is going to come in via the transmitter, which is to say the cargo teleporter. So what is the station proper actually going to be doing in terms of processing? And the simple answer to that is components. That all that will actually be doing is components. So, having said all that, let's go out of this. I want to make sure, and I did not turn creative mode off. I was pasting. I was looking at. I had built a. So in 18 series back, I did a video on how to build a drone miner, and it was a quadrille drone miner. Eventually, I rebuilt that miner. I called it Victor 2, Vision 2. And the idea behind that was to add some improvements, add some programmable blocks to get some functionality on there. And so I pasted that into the world here as a replacement for the 2 drill, and was really looking at it and was all like, okay, well, this is indeed a drone miner. It was not intended for a passenger to sit there. And that's good and that's bad. It's bad from the perspective of, I really want a miner that the engineer, the player, can sit in and actually do something besides just, I mean, your typical drone, is supposed to be reasonably autonomous, but the other side of that is controlling a drone from a remote location can be a bit challenging. Now, this particular model had cameras on all sides, so you could see quite a bit, but it's still not like, pressing the V key and actually seeing what's going on. Anyway, pasting, playing with the drone. What I will probably do is use the drone as a template, I'll call it, for building a different miner. And I really, again, I need to figure out how to design and build a miner that can be used effectively on the planets. One of the other things I did off screen was paste this guy into the world. This is my 304 drill miner, obviously a rather large monster here. So to take a look at this and why this ended up at 304 drills. So the idea was to put in cameras as well as floodlights, so you could actually see what you were doing. So the cameras used to be on the outside, but when they changed the drill head radius down to being just slightly larger than the drill itself, then that particular design became functionally useless because you could actually not drill anymore. You couldn't core drill. You could surface drill and sweep around and ultimately, basically like an apple, peel it until you could wipe it down to nothing. But you could no longer core drill because, well, if we let's go ahead and zoom in here a little close. Um, if the drill head here is just slightly bigger, or rather the radius of the drill cutting into the voxels is just slightly larger than the drill head itself, then you're going to end up, a quarter of the way through this block. And that was very problematic because, I could no longer get it. It used to be just slightly larger than a block. So I could actually squeak this thing through. It was really close. There, no question about it. You could not go, oops on the keys or on your mouse control and get away with it at all. You would break these things off. So that was a little bit problematic, but it worked. As long as you did core straight through, it worked. So once that was no longer working, then it was like, okay, let's put a drill on the other side of it as well and see if that will cut the distance in half. And the problem was 90% of the time it did. The remaining 10% of the time, it left those little slivers of voxels, which you can barely see, that went right in between the two drills and then impacted with the cameras, the spotlights, or the armor block there. So either way, this drill would come to this miner would come to a screeching halt because of that piece of voxel there that you can't really see. And what I was finding was that I was having to replace cameras and spotlights and this block that's underneath the camera so frequently that it just wasn't even worth using this particular miner. So fought with it for a little while. Then they changed the drill radius back up to being slightly more than half a block beyond the drill head, which means now I'm to the far side of the camera here for this drill, and this drill is also to the far side of this camera, which means we cover a little bit more than half of the block, which means we will never have voxels now that manage to go between two drills. So now we clear out that whole area. So this drill conveniently came back to life by virtue of them having changed the drill head radius back up to something fairly reasonable. So this became a viable miner again. As you can see, this is pretty big, and I did a video about this particular miner. It really is vanilla. There is nothing outside of the normal game here, excepting one thing which I put in later. I put in the matter transmitter in this thing. And if you are not into scripts and say scripts are not vanilla, then okay, fine. My version, my view of vanilla is that you don't have to load any mods. That's vanilla. So scripts, because scripts operate separately, they're not mods, they're scripts. So you put a programming block, which is vanilla, and then you run the script in the programming block, and then you can get ancillary functions. Because the programming blocks are programming blocks, if you publish a vanilla something and it has scripts running in it, those scripts are embedded in that programming block. So you get those when you res this thing into your world. So I still look at that as being vanilla because you, as the mod or the blueprint downloader, Did not have to load any special mods to make this thing work. It works out of the box. That's vanilla. So you didn't have to load anything special to make this work. So the one thing that is not vanilla on this particular miner is in fact the cargo teleporter. So there is a cargo container, a standard small container under here, so completely vanilla, that is already called cargo transmit. And then this thing was added in specifically for cargo transmitting. So that way this miner can actually pull in a just heinous amount of material and then transmit it back without having to stop, come back to the station here and offload for processing. It just goes right straight in for processing. So vanilla accepting one thing. Well, three things if we are saying that scripts are not vanilla. From our testing episode, we managed to completely eradicate one asteroid. So one asteroid down, we got a bunch of cobalt out of that, and then between other crashes decided, okay, why don't I go ahead and bring this monster in and see what we can do here. So we're gonna have a little fun with that. So we have to pick where we wanted to go, and I was headed to this one here because I wanted more cobalt. I'm getting low on cobalt. I ended up with some silicon, but I really still needed cobalt. So that leaves us the choice of this guy or this guy. So let me go ahead and turn that one back on, and that is really not close. Oh, okay. So so that's way over there, which is to say 5.67 kilometers away, which isn't far, of course, but so I do have uranium up here if I really wanted to mine the snot out of this, but I might as well go and get it and then leave this most of what's happening here in reserve. So one of the other things I tried to do was really make this non-dangerous. Was the idea. So I squared it off fairly well, and that's just kind of boring to do that on screen. So I didn't. Okay, so we have Mr. Miner here, large scale miner. We will set our sights V and move towards this guy. This is, if you did not see it already, hydrogen powered. I have to figure out why I have iron ore in here and it's not transmitting out. Maybe I haven't configured this yet. Over transmit on. Elsewhere receiver. And it's on drain all. And cargo transmit. Alright, let's go into inventory. What is this doing? Nothing. Because that's cockpit. Okay, now it's working. Pulling a lot of ice. There's some iron. There's a bunch of iron. Okay, so the good news is it's working now. And slowly we're seeing all this go down. So off we go. Now that that's actually doing what it's doing, we can see our cargo mass is going down, which is also exactly what I want. This thing is just such a Lumbering monster. So this has cobalt, iron, nickel, silicon, and uranium. And okay, maybe the shiny yellow is nickel rather than let us so if we look down the long axes here, let's get lined up and we'll do kind of similar to what we did in the other. In fact, let's thrust a little bit to the side here. We're gonna core this thing from the perspective of we're gonna take this in, I'm hoping, 4 pieces. So if I can do a quarter of this at a time, then we might actually be able to do something. So let's keep our view here and aim at this guy. Alright, and forward again. Now thankfully, unlike the other one, of course the other one had problems from the perspective of it had 2/3 of its thrusters missing. So this one at least has plenty of thrusters to work with. Alright, so this is a pretty good sized asteroid, so we are going to be able to core this thing and then have to take it apart in pieces. So let's readjust now that we actually see what size this thing is. So let us go ahead and core this thing. So we'll get roughly centered, and we'll look down the long axis here, shift upwards. So we're roughly gonna hit the center. There it is, and then thrust forward. Yeah, this is going to be quite a few passes to make it work. But imagine what this would be like with one of the small miners. Just imagine that. All right, we're gonna shift just a little bit, get ourselves, I think, lined up a bit better, and then we're gonna slowly thrust forward here. Thankfully, with hydrogen power, you have a really good acceleration here. So, drills on. Let's turn the spotlights on. And unfortunately, the cameras are going to go quite a bit wonky. Save my game. I haven't done that in a while. Mostly because I mean the camera just doesn't work very well. Okay, so dampeners off. Whoa. There we go. 27. We'll work with that. then it's just a matter of seeing what all this guy will do. Okay, let's go back to 1. If we want to really see what minerals we're taking in here, then we can, so we're just taking in stone at this point. So really we can look at the containers, and the reason the containers are going up is because I have a sorter that is actually, whoa, we have taken in, wow. So we need to halt. Cargo mass. Okay. Just the sheer amount of, so I think these small cargo containers are actually part of the ejection system, the stone ejection system, which is pretty beautiful to see it running, as a matter of fact. So it is slowly going down, which is good. All right, so here we go. 26. Because this has a significant amount more thrust, then it is really hard to get this, like, you know, third of a meter or something like that to actually be there. So one of the things, so I've got the spotlights on here. There's 4 cameras. So this is the upper camera. You can see, so this is the forward upper view, which is the center at the top. So this is the forward port view, which is center on the port side. For center starboard side, so it's basically center opposite. So you can actually see the voxels deforming and taking in here. And then this is the forward lower, so the basically central lower. Whether the spotlights make any difference at all, don't know. So one of the nice things about having the cameras is you can actually line up on an asteroid using cameras. So I think it adds some elements of realism from the perspective of if I'm, let's just pretend for a moment that I'm a space engineer and I'm out here driving this monster, and I'm sitting in the cockpit, which is behind the drills, so I can't see a damn thing. There's no such thing as going to view and being outside, right? I'm in the pilot's chair, so there's some iron, obviously, we're taking in. Some ice, maybe. So that's just colored stone, and maybe, yeah, I think this is just iron. So the cameras, I think, add an element of realism from the perspective of I'm getting to see the camera view of everything. So that's one of the reasons why this miner was designed and built the way it was to add those cameras on so you could actually see something. Technically, you could drive this remotely. There is a remote control block on this. So that kind of necessitated having a set of cameras. Because after all, if you're driving this thing remotely, you could be up to 5 kilometers away, depending on what your personal transmit distance is. So, one of the challenges. So, going back to, we are at 95%. So let's go ahead and that if there's any singular aspect of this particular miner that is how do I want to say inconvenient, is the fact that there are so many drills that it actually fills up those large containers so quickly. Now granted, we have 49 million stone, but likewise we've taken in 7 million iron. Now 7 million iron is going to translate in, I think it's like 10 or 15 to 1. So by the time we're done, we're going to end up with, you know, 500,000 ingots of iron out of this 7 million, give or take. I mean, there's a chart that actually says, you know, what the ratios are. I developed a ratio once upon a time, but I don't know if it's still accurate. So in the end, because there are so many drills on the front of this thing, it is taking in an obscene volume of ore, whether it be stone or any of the other ores. So it's a good thing from the perspective of you are taking in an obscene amount of material. The bad thing is that you go, you know, 20 meters into this asteroid, you're full, so you have to turn around and, you know, back out of the hole, which is very, very small, and then, you know, go unload. So that's one of the reasons I really like the cargo transmitters is you can just sit here and let the cargo transmitter do what it does, and eventually it will take us down. So you saw that we were at 95 to 96. We pushed into the 96 percentile, and now we're coming down, and it's going to take a while, but that's why these displays are here. So the other side is, and I don't know how this happened, but we are actually out of ice. So for some reason, the ice pulled out of the containers. So this may be a problem, you know, given the fact that we have no way to regenerate ice. So the only thing that may be our salvation here is if we can get some ice in this particular asteroid. So we're going to let that burn down just a little bit and see where it goes. And in the meantime, forgive me for a moment. I'm just going to leave you here, and I'm going to go get some tea. So the only other option with this particular miner, and this takes it completely out of the realm of vanilla, is to bolt an elsewhere container onto this. Now, the downside with the elsewhere containers is they're, basically the reason why I guess now that I've said that word, so elsewhere is the home of the Khajiit. If you don't know who the Khajiit are, then Elder Scrolls series put out by Bethesda Softworks is a long-time series. It started in the mid '90s. Was when the series started. So yeah, I know I'm dating myself again, but so we are on effectively the sixth iteration of that game. So there were 5 games that are standalone games, and the 6th iteration is Elder Scrolls Online, which is an MMO. Anyway, Elsewhere is the home province of the Khajiit, which are somewhat cat-like, and they have cat faces, and um, in everything up to Elder Scrolls 3, they actually were digitigrade. Um, they became planetigrade in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, and have continued to be planetigrade. So if those two terms don't mean anything to you, um, digitigrade is where they walk on their digits. Okay, so like the hands would be you walking on your fingers. We as humans are planetigrade, which means we are walking on the flats of our feet. So the heel touches the ground, um, and we walk like that. So it's called planetigrade. Um, so when it changed from digitigrade to planetigrade, it was actually a game engine consideration, because obviously a digitigrade animal, which was the Argonians and Khajiit, had a, in fact, completely different skeleton. So it was a different game mechanic. The characters had to have a particular skeleton to work, and the challenge was working with 2 different skeletons within the game. So that was a challenge. So rather than having to work with the 2 different skeletons, they decided not to do that, and so the Argonians, which are a reptilian race, and the Khajiit, which are a cat-like race, became they used the same skeleton as all the humans and elven races in the game, and now we use a single skeleton for all the characters in the game. But that also forced the Argonians and Khajiit to become planetigrade rather than digitigrade as they were before. So, elsewhere containers. I am a big fan of all things cat. And that's not that I have anything against canines. I love working with canines too. I've had, in fact, almost as many canines in my lifetime as felines. So I'm not specifically a cat person, even though I will talk much more about cats than I will about canines. So all things Khajiit are fun. So my idea behind the elsewhere containers was elsewhere. Now, if you read Khajiit lore, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but the reason their province became named Elsewhere is home is this magnificent place that is somewhere other than where you are. So it's the dream, it is the comfort of going to that place and you are home. So elsewhere. Um, so I always liked that philosophy that was that treasured place that is just outside the grasp, which is really to say is always that place that you are going to. And it is home. It is where you find peace. It is where you find love, where you find comfort. It is home. Um, and because, of course, because you like to roam around, then that is always elsewhere. So their province became named elsewhere at one point in time, which actually the Khajiit predate their province being named. So the Khajiit actually existed before their province was called elsewhere. And again, I'm going into the lore here a little bit, but so I always thought this great big huge gigantic space that was contained in this little itty bitty tiny box. There's some mysticism, some interdimensional play there. For those of you who have ever played Dungeons and Dragons and have worked with those wonderful dungeon masters who have very, very magical things like a bag of holding. This is an interdimensional thing. It uses interdimensional magic. So it is effectively limitless in size. So that was the concept behind this interdimensional thing, and I decided I'm just going to call them elsewhere containers. So there's some pun there. So all of your stuff goes interdimensional, which is obviously elsewhere. It's not here, so it has to be elsewhere. And why spell it normally when you have something like the Khajiit's home province of elsewhere, and it's spelled differently. So anyway, that was the advent of the elsewhere containers. So I can get around that whole problem of this particular drill assembly by using elsewhere containers. And of course, slowly we get around it by using the matter transmitters, but that only happens so fast. So I've left the drills on. I'm going to go ahead and get moving again. We'll fill this thing back up. If we look, okay, so we've entered into the cavern here. You can see by the different cameras. So this is the top camera, the bottom camera. It's not the bottom camera. There we go. There's the bottom camera. So only the port side is still going through. So ultimately we will zip through and end up into the central cavern here, which may actually help us out quite a bit, because then we could just steer around, and rather than core through this whole thing, we can really take it in segments and just, basically go our way out from the center. So we'll save an awful lot of time rather than going on a total planar mechanism here. So I think we might be able to save ourselves an awful lot of time and energy by doing that. So let me get back into the view. To get back into the view, see where we're at, about 37%. Still a lot of stone coming in there, but have worked an awful lot of that out. So I'm going to do the V, and of course it's not going to let me do that. But as I manage to get into this central cavern here, there we go. So we can actually see we made a big hole here. No question about that. So clearly an awful lot of iron here. Now, do we need this much iron? Probably the answer is no. Um, we collected an awful lot of iron by mining out that front section. Um, I think, in fact, we took in several million in ore, which translated to probably 250,000 ingots of iron, which really put us in a good state with iron. Um, and of course, mining that little asteroid down to nothing brought in quite a bit of cobalt, which is what we needed. And the biggest reason to be here is because this also has cobalt. So I still see Sparky up there in the top. Um, yeah, kind of see where this thing's going. Which actually we're almost through. So what I might consider, if we look off to the right side there, I think that's nickel. Okay, so Sparky is all done. So we're gonna accelerate just to get ourselves out into the middle here, which is really to say clear so we can rotate freely. And then we need to figure out really which way we're going to go. So we have, tell you what, let's, drills off. We're gonna, oops, that was supposed to be a T. So let's do some investigating here. We see this, which I think we're pretty sure this is nickel. And the only way to be sure of that, and okay, I do have a drill. So let's actually put my drill on my toolbar. So if we get up here, we've got obviously an abundance of iron. We are nickel. Okay, so we can see the marker there is nickel. If we go back down through here, so there was one that we could see, which was this here. This is something else. So this may be silicon. Yes. So we are also in need of silicon. In fact, more so than nickel. So the idea here was to be able to orbit around without bashing anything away, and then orient on the different elements here. So the other thing I want to find is the uranium. So we know there's nickel here, but where is the uranium? Because I marked this down as having uranium. So we have ice here, which is good. We actually do need ice. So let's go ahead and mark. Now we're gonna take an awful lot of material from here. So that's this guy here. We have seen the iron. Obviously, we've seen the nickel. We've seen the silicon. I did not mark this one with ice, so we can actually update. This does have ice. So, new from current position. Let's figure out where that one goes. There's that one. So, I'm gonna call this working. ice. Okay, so this is a specific marker right here at the ice, which will give me an orientation so I can spin the miner around and aim for that. So let's do the same thing with the nickel, which was over here on this side. So this is the silicon. So we can, as long as I go through without hitting that, because that will kill me. So here's the silicon. So we'll get right into the face of this and then do another GPS location. And we will call this working silicon. We have, there was the nickel, which I think was up here. So we'll get right into the middle of this and do the same thing here. GPS current. And this is working nickel. See a tiny bit of black over here, so I don't know if that's magnesium. Nope, just dark colored stone. So we'll do a quick orbit here. Here is cobalt, looks like. Yes, indeed. So let's intimately map the cobalt. GPS, new from current. And there's that one. Working cobalt. So if we look at all these, so we had cobalt, iron, obviously we know where that is. Nickel, we know where that one is. Silicon, we know where that one is. We know where the ice is. So we're still looking for the uranium. Okay, so we absolutely need the silicon and the cobalt and the ice, because the miner is out of ice, which means maneuverability on that is great for a very short period in time. Alright, so we are still on the search for uranium. Okay, so we've got the nickel there, or the silicon there. There's the nickel. We could actually probably do that much more gracefully from the outside. Alright, so there's the orbit around this way. So let's orbit this way and see what we can see. Big hole there, that's the one I made. Ho! Shadows. What is this? That is my nickel again. Or silicon, sorry. Silicon. Alright, so somewhere either I am completely amiss or there is uranium somewhere. So possibly might just be a very small patch, but this thing does have an ore detector. So let's go ahead and get in here on number 1, and number 7 will turn on my ore detector. Uranium, I see. This is why having an ore detector is a nice thing. There it is. Alright, so we'll get right up in here and stick our face into the radioactive material and then do the GPS. And working uranium. Okay, so there's all of my different things of uranium. So, in the order which I needed them would be cobalt, then silicon, which really might mean ice because this thing is hydrogen powered. So, perhaps I should go after the ice first. In fact, let's do that. So ice, then cobalt, then silicon, then uranium. One of the things I do want to check here is why was this able to pull all of the ice out of the generators? I don't understand why that was a thing. Quite a bit of uranium there. All right, working ice. So this is the stone ejection system. So we have 4 sorters that do nothing but pull in stone. Why do we have 4, you ask? Because sorters... Why can I not touch that? Sorters deal with a very small volume. So having 4 pulling stone simultaneously was great. There was a series of cargo containers. These are small cargo containers here, which ultimately these guys are constantly dumping stone into these guys. These guys are pulling directly out of those cargo containers as ejectors. So they're connectors, but they're ejectors in this case. That's all so their set is throw out. In fact, let's see if it'll let me in here. So throw out. So everything that goes into there gets just pitched. So you have to have sorters to use them this way, because otherwise all of the cargo that you want to keep will will go out. So in this case, we're keeping everything because we're doing that trace element extraction. So, okay, that's on the bottom side. Bottom is, of course, relative. Back into the cockpit here. We are going to shift orientation to the ice. One of the things I want to look at here, so I am at 87% hydrogen. So right now I am not bad. So what do we want to take in? We've got nickel, we've got silicon, and we have, where's our working cobalt? Cobalt, right there. I want to go view just to make sure I have the room to change orientation, which I think I do. The last thing I want to do is damage my miner. I'm very close. That's one of the downsides to a miner of this magnitude, is just the sheer size. I mean, it's a monster. So trying to maneuver it, especially when we consider I'm maneuvering inside of an asteroid, then there are all the little... So even though I have a marker separate from that, I'm still going to use my big guy. All right, so what we need to do is zoom in close enough to see where we're going to hit first. So drills on, and we'll move slowly forward. In fact, we can just... There's our 26. Yep, I think we're going to go in multiples of 26. So hopefully this thing is big enough we're just going to take this whole thing out. If not, I'm outside the asteroid and I'll come back in. So if I look at my V, I am just about lined up on that. So we are going to just plow our way out. So onto screen 2. So I'm nowhere close. We're camera 2, camera 3, camera 4. So this lower camera, it looks like we're going to hit there first, which is all fine and dandy. Yeah, so we're going to plow through a whole lot of iron getting to that. I mean, I could technically go up and over, but I might as well just go right straight out. I still have 87% hydrogen, so that's a good thing. And we'll slowly work our way out here. So I'm using my GPS marker as that's my goal. So I'm gonna keep adjusting to hold that as close on course as I can. I'm not sure why I'm drifting. So we're taking an iron. So we are once again drilling. You can see our cargo mass is changing. So if the cargo teleporter keeps up, then we'll stay at 0 liters, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to, once we get the multiple drills going, then we're never going to catch up. So we will fill up rapidly. So reviewing cameras, starboard side, bottom. So you can see we're definitely into something somewhere. At least I can see the goal. There's our cobalt. Starboard sides, yeah. I'm wondering. Not sure where. Forward lower is definitely into the pure drilling now. And so is my starboard. Off. A little piece away, and then we're going to be into another piece here. Port view, and that's the upper. Kind of fun watching all the different views. And we are keeping up well. So surprisingly, the cargo teleporter is keeping up really well. Oh, that's because we're chewing out that one little corner there. There's our cobalt. Camera's doing something funky. I don't know if this was a V-Rage limitation or what, but to me, you put the camera somewhere and it just goes. It just zooms right through the voxel. The camera is virtual, so why should it have an issue with voxels? But it does. It always has. For a long, long time. So, as you can see here, we're going to get into a lot of iron here. And in fact, I'm going to change orientation here a little bit. Because I want to take the whole thing at once. There we go. That way I don't damage anything. I seriously need to consider maneuvering thrusters for this thing. So I turn off my mains and just have these little tiny maneuvering thrusters. So the idea here was I wanted to take as much of this thing as I can. And I may need to reorient yet again, but we'll see. I mean, if I go a little low and then it shouldn't be a big deal. So still 87%, which is good. We've actually got 2 hydrogen tanks. Let me see if it'll swing around to this side. Oh, 4 hydrogen tanks. Sorry, 4 hydrogen tanks here. We've got 8 oxygen generators doing everything, or hydrogen gaseous generators rather. Okay, so if we look there, let's go ahead and come to a halt. So I'm about 1 drill width below the bottom of that deposit, and so I want to, oops, that's shifting. Okay, so that is about the center of the drill width there, at least what I can see, and that should be about the same there. So, dampeners off. There we go. should be touching the cobalt now. I have no idea how big this deposit really is. So what we may do is back away, turn, and then come back in. I don't know if this is just a small surface deposit. I mean, we'll find out here as we drill through everything. If there's anything left, then we'll see. But definitely taking out a lot of stuff. And of course we're taking in, you know, a lot of ore. So 14%, not bad at all. Definitely looking good. We are almost through the deposit. Okay, so I see no blue. So I think we got the entire deposit all in that one thing. So see, I'm going to back off of this. Thrusting down. I think I'm clear. So we are going to orbit back around. Okay, so drills off. We're gonna jump out and we are going to do the visual and see if there is any cobalt at all left. And I think the answer is no. I think we took it all, which is exactly what I wanted. Okay, so stage 2, we got the cobalt. So stage 2 is let's delete working cobalt. Is now gone. Silicon is our next, so we need to swing around the outside and get to that, which will be pretty easy, I think. All right, get back onto number 1. I just wanted to make sure all that's off. So silicon is on that side, so let's orbit under. And swing around. So that whole area there is our silicon. A lot of stone in there too, but the question is, can we take that in one piece? Let's get closer. See how big that really is versus our drill package. Let's take it in pieces. I'm going to take this whole thing. Swing around this way. I was just seeing that reflection of light, and it just looked like I had some issues. Okay, drills on. That way I see the sparkies when they happen. Alright, looking at this, I need to go up just a hair, but it looks like I am the other way. Okay, so I think I'm going to take that whole corner. That's the intention, to take the whole corner. I want to get just a little closer, and then 33. Perfect. Yeah, so that was 27% of my hydrogen just to maneuver. So I'm at 60%, not bad, but 60%, which is exactly why we're going after the ice after this. But I'm not done maneuvering here, so that is a little bit of a problem. Okay, so we hit something. Don't know what it was, but it brought us to a stop. So we'll try again. Sometimes if there is a tiny sliver of a voxel or something, you can just back off and the drill will drill it, and then you continue forward. So definitely into the silicon there. Okay, and we should take out this entire piece without any issue. Trying to get a decent viewing angle. So one of the questions with miners um, is logically how big is too big, and it really boils down to a matter of resources. How many resources do you have in terms of components to build something? And if you have plenty of resources to build something of this magnitude, then so the bottom line with this drill is you spend 30 seconds. Okay, the cobalt was a great example of this. So I just swept through, took that whole deposit of cobalt in one single done. And that took what? A minute? Maybe? If you were to spend time hand drilling that, it would take you a day. If you're drilling that out with a small miner, then it really depends on if you have the ability to transmit the cargo. If you have the ability to transmit the cargo, then it's much easier than you just keep drilling forever, but it's still going to take you a couple hours. This thing took a minute, and it was all done. So the magnitude of the miners are a real game changer. When you get to this stage of your gameplay, then a large scale miner is immensely helpful, because I need cobalt, I need silicon. So you take your monster miner out, and now you have more of that than you could ever possibly want, all in one shot. And it took you an hour of effort to do that. So that's the advantage of the large scale miner. But in the end, it's a progression. So when you're first building, you're hand mining everything. You have a very finite amount of space. You take it back and you build yourself. Hopefully you have a refinery. In my case, it was a platform ship. So I had a medical station, assembler, a refinery, and gas generator. So you had those four basic things that were all part of the ship that I was in. So when I dismantled that all and put it onto my working platform, and I happened to be in an asteroid where I had a source of ice, which meant I can keep that oxygen generator running. I have my bottles with me, so even as I'm working, I don't have to worry about depleting oxygen or hydrogen because I've got my bottles. So when I look at it and say, oh, I'm down, then I can look at my inventory and say, okay, I have 40% left in this bottle. No biggie, I can keep working. So it really becomes a function of energy. And then you just go back to your medical station and fill back up, which also fills up your gases. So you're hand mining. and eventually you get to the point where you have 2 refineries, and then you put the improvements on there, and so the goal really is to get yourself to the point where you can actually equitably process, um, and then okay, we are clear. So coming to a stop. I am going to turn off dampeners and get myself moving directly backwards. That way I'm not burning a whole bunch of hydrogen in the process of doing all this. Oh, I hit something. I saw the orientation change. So, being as this is all about strip mining, right? So why am I taking stone when I can just I changed plans because I hit. There we go. I'm just going to go through the center of that thing. Which should conceivably take more silicon than we could ever possibly use. So I think I'm going to be good with that. There's a part of me that wants to just utterly mine this thing out, but so if there's any real concern at this point, it is. Let me check my orientation here. I do want to go through the core of this thing. So, is that track good? Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, the stone really doesn't matter. I mean, ultimately, you know, taking a certain spattering of stone is just not that big of a deal. I can process it. So that's really what matters, is can I deal with the volume of stone? And the answer is yes, I can. So it's not really a big deal. So there we're into we've got a little bit of stone there on the bottom still, but now we're into the large scale silicon deposit there. And once we get ice in here, in fact, what do I have in my personal inventory? Nothing. So this can be a little dangerous. So the miner is running, doing what it's doing. So I'm going to jump out. I am going to go to the ice. And start mining ice. Is this a little bit ass backwards in philosophy? Yes. Because obviously hand drilling ice is slow by comparative to what I'm doing with that big monster down there. However, having said that, I have automatic ore pickup, by the way. So a little bit of ice, even though it's going to deplete extremely rapidly, is still a little bit of ice. So any generation of hydrogen is a good thing. So my intention here, while the miner is doing what the miner does, then I am over here getting lifeblood for the miner, which is to say propulsion for the miner. And it's going slow enough that I don't have to worry about it running away on me. Back off of this and see what we've done. Just this tiny, tiny little hole. Get back in my hole and just continue doing my little orbits here. Up more and more ice. And when I'm all full, then I head back to the miner and fill it up. Or really just, you know, put what I have in there. So from the perspective of intelligence and mining intelligently, this is a bad idea. I just want to point that out. Flying away from your miner while it's mining is never a good idea. So no matter how you work that through in your head, not a good idea ever. There's always a certain amount of risk when you do something like that, that something's going to damage your miner and blow up, or any number of other disastrous effects, which in the end would leave you stranded out here in the middle of nowhere. Keeping in mind, I do not have any bottles. So I have just what's on me. So if I lose my miner for whatever reason or for whatever disaster that happens, then I am just totally and wholly screwed. Okay, good news is I'm almost done with ice. One more. There we are. Okay. Now, the trick is finding the miner. There's the production base. There's the miner. Large miner. Put my drill away. Go over here. Find the miner. There's the miner. Where is it? There's the large miner. Just coming out the other side. So the idea is to come in behind the drills. Definitely don't want to get near the drills. So we accomplished two things in one shot. So get in Z. I'm going to do inventory. Gas. Oh, these are still called oxygen generators. So we have 8 oxygen generators. I have 162. So that means I can put 20,000 in each one, approximately. You can see it's burning through that really quickly. So the fact that these are still called oxygen generators, you can tell I built this a long time ago. Alright, there we go. Okay, so there was an awful lot of silicon there that now is in my possession. So, the good news is the nickel is right there. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you dizzy there. So what I'm trying to do is come in at a good angle. In fact, let me come up here. Now that I have a tiny bit of ice. So my My idea is I just go through the core of this, much like I did the silicon, and get, the vast majority of the deposit here. Thankfully can use much of the shadows to my advantage. See where I'm going to hit first. So again, the downside to hydrogen is you burn through it pretty quick. The fact that I'm no longer going up in yeah, we're out again. But that was to be expected. I'm still at 50%. So I'm happy with that. So by the time I get through to the other side of this deposit, I will have taken in a boatload of nickel. So we have already taken in almost 600,000 in nickel, and I'm barely into it. And I'm transmitting as well. So there's 1 million in nickel. A lot of nickel here. So the bottom line when you're mining on this large of a scale is, of course, we already asked the logical question, how big is too big? The next logical question is, at what point? So if we break down survival into all the various elements of what make survival survival. So power and gases, whether you want to consider those 1 or 2 or 1A and 2A, or A1 and A2, however you want to look at those are both critical to your survival. If you run out of power, you can no longer drill, you can no longer weld, you can no longer do anything except breathe and move around. So you have to have a source of power, whether that be a cockpit where you can sit down and regenerate, or a medical bay. It really doesn't matter which one you use, which one you have. As long as you have a source of power, then you can work pretty well. The next thing is your gases. Obviously, if you're out of hydrogen, you can't move. If you're out of oxygen, you can't breathe. Both of those put you in a very precarious situation when it comes to trying to survive. So, whichever one you look at first really doesn't matter. The next goal is resources. And obviously, if you're out in space, you're going to find those resources. There's asteroids absolutely everywhere. The aspect then is collecting them, which is your hand drill, and gathering enough of those so you can meet certain goals, which ultimately are scalar. Okay, so in our case, we set up a processing station because even with my hand drill, I can fill up a refinery to the point where it cannot keep up with me. So I take in the quantity, I dump it off, and it does what it does. So the goal then becomes building a second refinery and a third refinery and a fourth refinery to the point where now it's actually keeping up with you. And then you need those components to start building other things, another assembler. And then you are to the point where my first logical goal is I want a miner, an actual vessel type miner. And once I have that, then I mine in a much larger scale with the goal of I will mine to the point I have enough resources to do a larger miner. So in our case, we went from the small miner to the 49 drill medium miner, but large grid miner. Now, the disadvantage to that particular miner, it was ion powered. Ion thrusters, A, they only work in space. B, they take platinum to make thruster components. So not necessarily the most practical in conceptual design because they required all those resources. But what we did was a little creative grinding. We moved the thruster components around to the point where we had all axes with 8 thrusters. At that point, I actually did very well with that particular miner. It was maneuverable, which is all you need. It didn't have to, win any races. It didn't have to, do anything fancy. It just needed to mine, which it did very well. At that point, I'm taking in dramatically more resources. So because I'm taking dramatically more resources in, then I can now, totally overwhelm my my refineries, but at the same time, I can produce components to a fairly large level. And once I can produce components to virtually any level, then the sky's the limit. What do you want to build? Do you have a design? Do you just throw it together? So it's about those resources. It's about the components. So once you get an endless source or a reasonably endless source of components, then you're there. You can build anything you want. Large ship, small ship, doesn't matter. So in my case, I go from a small grid miner that can now take in 20 times what I can carry, or depending on how you have your settings, 20 to 30 times what you can carry. Now you're exceeding your refineries again, but that's fine because eventually they'll have some resources. So in the end, you have the components you need to build a larger scale miner, which is exactly what we did. We went to the 49 drill miner, which is large scale. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that that was a logical intermediate choice. It really wasn't in many ways. Um, I go from the small miner, which is relatively few components, all things considered. That's why you always want to start out with a small miner, because it's small. A block for a small ship may be, you know, 15 components. A block for a large ship may be several hundred, or a refinery which is 1,000. Okay, so it depends on what you're building, but it's really all about the components that you need. So large grid, when you take that step from small grid something to large grid, you're a dramatic resource differential. All right, let's see. We're still going out the stone here, so that's all fine and dandy. And we are 95%, and I'm not really worried about that. Don't think we need to take in any more stone, but if you want to see what this thing can do, if we can get ourselves out of here. There we go. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn on the stone ejection. So you can see what that looks like. So this becomes a function of how many objects do you have turned on. In my case, it's 64. So they quickly delete themselves, but either way, it's stone. I don't really have much need for an infinite amount of stone. Now, granted, we do the trace ores extraction, but so that's so the drill's obviously pulling the stone in. The sorters there that you see, the green underneath, are pulling in all of the stone that they can manage. They're putting it into containers as fast as they can. So each one of those is limited to, I think, 3,000 liters, so it's not very large at all. And that's why there's 4 of them, so it can deal with the volume of stone that you would have, like what I'm doing now. In fact, let's, now that we've done that, we can see, so 21 million, and I'm not even remotely keeping up with the amount of stone that's coming in there. So I'm 99% full. Now I'm 100% full. Jump back down. So even with the stone ejection going, I'm still taking in more stone than I can deal with. 23.5 million in nickel. Okay, now this is ore, which I don't know what it refines out in the grand scheme of things, and silicon, 5.5 million in ore. Okay, so with those kinds of numbers, I'm done mining. You hit something once and utterly mine it out, and you're done. So in this case, I have plenty more silicon left. I have plenty more nickel I can come and get, provided I even need it. So, overall, we really don't have. That's the nice thing about the miner. But again, when is enough enough? So you take a miner of this size and you hit one deposit, and boom, you have 5.5 million in ore. That's not counting what's already been transmitted back to the station. How much do you need? I need enough to make those components. Well, how many components do I need? Well, that depends on what I'm making, obviously, but now when I have millions upon millions of ingots, there is no issue. The issue becomes, okay, I can sleep while my assemblers are doing what my assemblers are doing. I can queue up as many materials as I want. If you have something like the build and repair system or the nanite control factory in operation, either one of which can queue materials, then you set your projector up for whatever vessel or vehicle that you have, and then at that point it's, what do I want to accomplish? Do I want to make it across the solar system to the next planet? What do I want to do? So really it becomes a function of what's the next goal. So that's where this philosophy of how, when is enough enough? And at this point, because this miner can take in so much material, even besides trace element extraction, one swipe and I'm done with whatever mineral I just mined, provided I have a big enough asteroid. But most asteroids in the game have at least a significant quantity of something, so you'd have 500,000, and 500,000 in any given ore is going to yield you 10% of that in ingots. So 500,000, there's 50,000 ingots. You can do an awful lot with 50,000 ingots. I mean, you can build a pretty monumental ship depending on what you need. And really it's back to what you're intending on making. If you have the components that you need, especially if you've got an inventory manager that's making components constantly, then not a big deal. You put your ship on the projector, you let one of the automated building systems build it for you, and all of a sudden you can sit back and watch. Now, does that take a lot of the fun out of the game? It could, arguably. All right, so kind of mining out the back here, and we're still dumping stone because I really don't need the stone. So one of the reasons I built in the stone ejection system was because of this issue, that you go through the mineral very, very quickly, and then you're just going through stone, and you really don't need that much stone, but your drill's taken in, and so what do you do with that? And so this particular miner was built with the semi-efficiency in mind, so I put on the stone ejection system, which makes it convenient. Now I can take in as much stone as I want, so I can turn it on and off, but in the end I can dump a lot of that stone and just get rid of it. Now that there's limits of objects, then you're not totally lagging your game by dumping the sheer volume of stone. All right, ice is our next thing. Ice and then uranium. So we have plenty of iron. We've taken in cobalt, we've taken in nickel, We've taken in silicon, so we need ice because we're safety of flight issues, um, and uranium. So. So one of the settings that I could potentially work on here, um, no, it's just going to dump it back in there. So let's look at our teleporter here, and I should be doing that in control panel. Cargo teleporter. So this is set up as drain all. It's a blacklist, and for whatever reason, I don't know why it did this, is it pulled the ice out. So what I've done in the past is actually set this as ice and uranium ingot. So it will not pull either one of those, because I need the ice. The other side of that is ice is a non-refinable, meaning I can use it as is. So how much ice do you need? The other side of that is how much ice is there. Okay, there's not an infinite amount of ice out here in space. There's a lot, but not like on a planet where you're next to a lake and you have an infinite ice source. You know, space, you have to find the ice resources. So in this case, turning the blacklist ice and uranium ingot then protects me, because then all the ice that comes in stays there. It's not coming out. It's just staying right there. So that may be a good idea from the perspective of, I don't know why when I turned the transmitter on, it all of a sudden took all the ice away as well. It shouldn't have done that, because the oxygen generators are not, the gas generators are not up for grabs. They hoard by design. So things that pull materials should not be able to inherently pull out of a reactor for uranium ingots, or the gas generator for ice or anything like that. It's not supposed to be able to pull stuff out. Those are not pullable inventories. So they're kind of sacred inventories. So why it allowed that to pull through and pull all that out, I have no idea. So it was kind of frustrating, because I mean, we are in the situation we're in now because it pulled all my ice out. The other side of that equation may actually be a little more simple than that. That the gas generators, they only have so large of an inventory. So they're not infinitely huge by any means. I think that was a 12,000 inventory. So 12,000 liters. So given that size, there may have been a bunch of inventory ice in inventory that was specifically there to allow the oxygen generators to keep pulling. So one of the ideas I had was designing a designing a miner that actually had an isolated storage for ice and uranium ingots. Alright, so let's go, sorry, so we're not burning a shit ton. The uranium is closer. Watch it go. Have I? No more, Alright, let's go up. There is the ice. So my idea here is to just plow right through the center of this thing. So I just got to get myself oriented. So let me do the V. Alright, so I am not lined up. That's better. Alright, so if I look at that deposit as it is, that's about right. Okay, so then it's lining up this direction. Oops, wrong way. There we go. Alright. Little ways out. Alright. Check the orientation here. Again, the idea is to just drill through. All right, Z. 30. I'm happy with 30. And we will be taking in ice shortly. And then we'll do uranium, and then I think we're done with this particular asteroid. So I can update its designators, because I think we're completely out of cobalt. I think I utterly mined that particular vein out. We should see, there it goes. Now that I actually have ice all around, and I am generating ice. So we can see ice, 1.8 million. There's 3 million ice. And I'm barely touching this thing. So they're slowly filling up the tank, so 32%. Oops, we hit something. And once again, so sometimes a slight angular change will also remedy that. And this is a problem only because those drills are so close to just being a block and a half wide. And what I mean by that is, so it's just about the drill head, the radius, the drill radius is just about 2 blocks wide, which means a half a block on each side. So 2 drills running with a block in between has a very, very small chance of having a voxel, and this is what happens. The problem when you're going fast and you hit one of those voxels is you rip your ship apart. The advantage to having the cameras in the front is so you can see stuff. The disadvantage is you run into problems exactly like this, where you have those little slivers of voxels where there's kind of nothing you can do. So there's a lot of design features for this particular vessel that are good and bad. They're good from the perspective of, obviously you can see it's taking in just a boatload of materials. The downside is that it does have these quirky little things that make it difficult to deal with. All right, we are into iron again. So let me shift to, here's where the cameras come in. So there's iron, clearly iron. That's still ice. That's still ice. So that's my port side is dealing with iron. Upper is into iron. Port side is into iron. Starboard side is still dealing with ice. So my thoughts here are, as soon as that changes into iron, then so as soon as the starboard side and lower change into iron, then I'll stop, back up, and then start back into the iron again, or sorry, into the ice again. So we'll completely mine this ice out. So there's lower. So upper port starboard is just now getting into full iron, and lower. All right, so Z, full stop, T for view, and we will back out. Slowly, but back out. And of course we did change slightly in orientation, which we can see here. I'm dragging as I'm coming out. All right, so I'm effectively on the flat plane here, so we're going to let's go ahead and thrust to port. And we'll come over here until we are well into the stone on this side, just a little bit more. There we go. I think we are as far over as we can get. So Z, there's our 26.26. And we'll do the same idea again. Wow, I didn't actually finish the ice over there, but that's okay. We will deal with that once we get over to that side. So this is just really an opportunity to get the ice. Do I need to mine it all? No. Why is it no? Because I have 25 million ice. Okay, how much ice do you need? Probably not very much. Definitely not 25 million. So we have enough to keep the gas generators going. Can we just burn full thrust forever? The answer is no, because we just have a lot of thrusters back there. But as long as the hydrogen tanks fill up, then we're good. So in this case, we just basically have infinite ice storage. And of course, that's 54% of my storage space right now being dedicated to ice. So how much do we need? Grand question. So let's see what this is. Mining ice, as we can see here. So that's the upper drill in the center, or the upper camera in the center. This is the port side view, which is I'm pure into iron. So this is almost done with ice according to the center. And let's look at the lower one. We're still taking ice, but we can see the iron there. So this one's just wide open. Can't really see anything. So it looks like we are into iron for everything. So dampers on. See if we can catch our view, and backing out. so we should be far enough out to thrust to starboard. And I think that should be plenty. Yep, we got all of it on that side. So this one is just a little deeper. Oh, and that was stone in the corner, so we really were close. All right, so dampers off, and there we are. 0.26%, which is great. In this case, I think I can get in close enough to the drills to actually watch what's going on. We can watch the grass grow. Should have probably come in a little bit before I just set the cruise control, but eh. We'll get there. Alright, so the camera is... I don't know what the camera is going to do. If it'll move forward or completely freak out. So if it'll stay here, then we can actually see when we run out of ice. And again, the idea is, do we really need to, do we really need all this ice? Especially that we have a lot of ice back, you know, in our in our own asteroid. We've got a bunch. $33 million. All right, so stop. Change our view again. Let's go ahead and back out. Oops. So make sure I'm clear, which I am. So thrusting to port. All right, so down. There's our big uranium thing. Big being relative. Alright, so let us thrust down to get I think that's somewhat parallel. Come forward here. I'm going to try and do this similarly to how we did the ice. So, oh, sorry, thrust the other way, thrust to starboard there. Was an oops. Change orientation to the point of being targeted right at this. Alright. That I think is about as close as we're going to get. See if that changed any. Nope, we're just about center and just about center. All right, and thrust forward to get close. Let's swing to this side because the top port corner is going to hit first. In fact, let me change orientation just to hit the whole thing at once. And we'll shift down. Alright, I think that's about as close as we're going to get here. So let's move in for the proverbial kill. Okay, I see the sparky, so we're there. Alright, so V, so we can watch what's going on, and we're now seeing uranium come in. But the uranium is transmitting, so that will go back to the station to be processed. The upper center view, the port view, starboard view, lower. So we're pure uranium here. So I don't know whether these will change to iron or stone, but either way we'll take in a lot. Looks like we've changed to stone. something. Well, maybe not. Alright, we definitely cored this whole thing. So let's come over here to starboard. Get far enough to starboard that we'll take the whole darn thing. We'll go slowly because we're already into the Sparky there. Alright, off 26. Not a whole lot of deposit there, but uranium being uranium, 9 times out of 10 it just takes you so absurdly long to refine it, that taking in, you know, huge quantities at once is kind of a pain. So I don't think we're gonna have any of these on camera. Yeah, a little bit there, and then the bottom one. So that one we can see on the camera, but we're going to stone to the point where it's going to be out of our view. We can kind of see it by, you know, zooming in and viewing up here, kind of seeing where we run out. So we can see it in the center there. So as soon as that whole upper section turns to stone, then we'll stop and back out. And I think we're there. Dampers on. Backing up. Thrusting to port. Alright, should be. Is that thing in the corner. Visual, I guess. What's a hole in the voxel? Adapters off. $20 is low, but it'll do. find any way to see, and there really isn't unless I zoom in. There we go. We just put the camera right inside. Let me get that out of the way. In fact, we'll get the whole HUD off here and we'll just watch what happens. There, taking in a tiny bit more. I think that's all stone though. So we've got the center and the upper portion there. All right, dampeners on. Backing up. So, possibly the drill is wide enough to take this whole remaining portion of the deposit. I think. So, up we go. That's plenty tall enough. And dampers off. There's my 26. See if we can find a that's probably about as good as we're going to get. Oops. Looks like we're done. Still a little bit more over there. Alright, so dampers on and backing out. So the question is there any left? And I think there's just a tiny little bit on this corner. stone now. So, backing up a hair more. So we clear, then down. Oops, guess I didn't really want that much. Edge, there's the edge, so down just a hair, and I think just a tiny bit to start with. Alright, get forward onto the stone, might hit in that bottom corner. Dampers off. 27. And you know what? We should be able to view it from here. I'm taking it off. Yeah. Get a little hole there. Almost there. Another 2 meters. Alright, I think that's it. I think we're into stone. Dampers on. Backing up. Alright, so the choice is, so we have eliminated the uranium. So, let's do an update. So, this one is iron. We took all the ice. Did we take all the ice? I think I did. So, working ice, delete, working uranium, delete. So, silicon we still have, which is directly below us. All the stuff is frozen. Why is it all frozen? Ideally, I don't know if we can take it all or not. Maybe we'll do it in a couple swaths. Now that we're mostly ejecting the stone, this is alright. Alright, dampers off. 26. Here's a pretty decent view. Actually see what it's doing and see where it reaches the limit there. The sun is shining on it, so we can actually see when we get there. Oops, should have left alone. Good. Gotta love a big miner. So the only miner that's perhaps better than the big miner is what I call the micro miners, and it uses an overpowered drill. So it's a single drill that is like a 50-meter radius or something like that. It's utterly huge, and you can go through and just decimate ore veins on planets, and it's hydrogen powered, so it's you never have to worry about being in the wrong angle or anything like that. Well, I mean, you do, but not like a lot of atmospheric miners. So my guess is at some point on the station we're actually going to fill up to the point where it can't deal with anymore. Now the good news is there's an elsewhere container that's the initial container. So ultimately, if the sorters don't have any room where they can push things, they'll just stay right there in the elsewhere container. So that's this thing will not know the difference in terms of it will never fill up because it can't transmit. So because there's an elsewhere container over there. I'm wondering if it will be more practical to just come straight through. I'm almost done with the nickel here in this row, or sorry, silicon in this row. In fact, other than the silicon at the top, I think, well, there's a little bit at the bottom. There's just a tiny bit more at the top before it is done. And then and there it is. So alright, and backing off. So what I wanted to do was twist a little bit just to get out of the stone debris, which is to say the voxels there on the side. So changing orientation a little bit. We're gonna back off. I was thinking about going up and then messing around there, but no. Alright, so how high do we have to go up to decimate this thing? I think that shall be about right. All right. There it is. I'll stick with that one for a moment. This is just to get rid of that. I'm pretty sure it's all stone. backing off because I want this one piece. I want all those voxels completely gone so I don't run into them later on. Okay. Alright, for my next stupid trick, I'm going to, I just want to see if we mined out all of the ice, and I think we did. The question is, where was it? No, we did not. So I still have quite a bit of ice here. Alright, so let's change this. Still has ice. Might not have any silicon here shortly, but I think that's over the silicon there. Probably to the point I could have shifted over about 20 meters and been just fine. I suppose I should not be even slightly worried about the ice, being as I have 33 million units, whatever those happen to be, of ice. So, probably worried about nothing. And I'm sure the silicon is the same, but I'm on a mission now, so I just have to do, I just have to utterly mine the two minerals out. I don't think you're ever going to run out of iron. Iron is just everywhere. So I don't think that that can even happen. About another 10 or 12 meters, I think, before that's all done. Maybe not. Maybe it's less than that. Another 2 or 3 meters, and then I think we're just in stone. Yeah, I think that's all stone now. So, I think I can shift this way. And take out another large section, possibly all of it. Yep, I think I can get all of it with that. All right, adapters off. Then we just have to go down. I don't know if the V-Rage engine is what did the voxels like this, the asteroids, but the asteroid design actually is really cool. I've always been impressed with that. The way the minerals just kind of, I mean, it looks like the ice and uranium, for example, looked like a meteor of ice impacted with this meteor and then left the ice deposit there. So I've always been very impressed. They've always kind of been that way. They've always been really very impressive, I thought. Okay, another 5 meters, I think. And I think we are there. Stopping. Backing off. All right, now, kind of got two pieces here. So we've got that lower section. And then we've got this piece. So I think, let me shift a little bit and then back all the way out so I avoid that corner. Let's reorient. And then nose down. And thrust down. Nose down again, just slightly. All right. Oops. Nose up, because what I want to do is clear that whole piece. All right. So thrusting forward again. Guess that's kind of taking the stone in a second time, huh? freeze. Save game. There we go. All right. I think that'll hit the top of it. D7. That'll do. So, if we orient around this, then we'll see the nickel there, and I think let's swivel around. Well, the problem is swinging that side we can't see. So I think I'm drills just high enough to hit that. Camera will probably snap to somewhere else, but here's a good view where we can see everything, including where we should hit the top voxels there and take those out. Yep, it's having a hard time doing something. There we go. Do we see any more? Did we mine it all out? I think so. Stopping. Where did we? Can I see? Center top. Yeah, I think there is more there. Alright, so T. I guess we're there and we're dumping stone anyway, so we'll just take it all. Waiting for all the stone to disappear, which tells me there's no more. Okay, full stop. So all I see is a swath in the center. Ideally would be to go straight down on it, but oops, darn, wrong one. Alright, I think just mow through the middle of this. Check my orientation one more time. Yep, I think it's good. Dampeners off. 26. think that's really close. Just a little bit more there. And I think that's it. That was a freeze. Alright, backing out. Alright. I'm gonna work the nickel. Or, yeah, I think that's nickel, yeah. Okay, so I think we're done with the silicon. So let's change that one. So I want to take that whole top section off. So I think I'm far enough over, so up. I think that's it. Straight in like this. Okay, recheck. That might be close. I can't tell if I have just a little sliver over there or not. I know I'm gonna be those little pieces there. Alright, so given where the deposit goes inside, alright, so using the line of drills, okay, I guess that wasn't as bad as I thought. Alright, dampers off. 26. I'm almost there. I think I've got everything on the top. Alright. So I've got these little bits on the side over here. I think I got everything there. So I want to clear these little tiny pieces on the side. Alright, I think that okay, where are those? Okay, there we go. I think it's just stone now. Backing off. Look around, see if I can see anything. So the idea here is to take out the swath all the way in. So we're going to start up a little bit. So I can see the very front of the drills. So we want to wipe out this top little portion, and then we'll back off and go down. We might not even have to back off, we might just be able to slide down. Yeah, I'll figure out how to deal with that piece. And then we've got a bunch down below, but we'll deal with that. Alright, come this way so we get all of it. Alright, dampers off. Okay, I guess I got those little pieces, so... Alright, a little better. We're taking that corner off, which is probably a good idea, but oh well. Alright, I gotta see. Uh-oh. Oh, okay, there is quite a bit more here. Might have to go up to catch those little slivers up there, but that's alright. Yeah, one of the things I just noticed is I'm running at 64 gig of memory, so they haven't fixed the memory leak, but it hasn't crashed. So previously, So in 186, if it got up to 58, it was done. So definitely would have crashed. So there are clearly some improvements, but the fact that it needs 64 gig of RAM is still absurdly stupid. There's clearly memory issues at play there. So okay, so my guess is this is swap file writing is why it's doing that. It can't read and write to memory anymore. So this is probably a good place to stop because we've been going at this for quite a while. So this was kind of a demonstration of the new miner and how to utterly mine out an asteroid. So this is Kenty Tiger signing off. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.